Welcome to the Pander Bros podcast, where we talk comics, movies, and cross-media storytelling.
This episode, we go back in time to the rain-soaked streets of Portland, Oregon in the 1980s, where two teenagers with dreams of making movies and comics found a way to fulfill their creative aspirations.
Stick around as we share our experience through the rough and tumble times of starting out as freelance artists and what led to our first big break in the comics industry, drawing the nationally published indie comic series Grendel, Devil's Legacy.
Written by Matt Wagner and published by Dark Horse Comics. I'm Jakob.
I'm Arnold.
And we are comic book creators and filmmakers and brothers. And so we thought we would just kind of dedicate this episode to our first major book, Grendel, Devil's Legacy, and kind of go back into the time machine and talk a little bit about the origin story of our collaboration and kind of the era, the milieu, and this opportunity that just changed the lives of two young guys living in Portland, Oregon in the mid-'80s. And it really transformed the trajectory of our kind of collaboration and career and life.
We're going to go back to the old school.
Go
back to the old days.
Back to old Portland.
But we're going to do it quickly.
It was a very supportive environment because we did have two artist parents, and they were always, giving us blank sketchbooks and stuff to draw on. So we were drawing, as little kids really early on, and also watching, our dad draw and paint, and our mom create art as well as a printmaker and paper maker. And so it was just always kind of around. And in a way, I think at that time, the being a creative and being a creator was not nearly as mainstream and accepted as it is today. In fact, back then it was really like, people would just be like, why would you want to be an artist? Why don't you be a lawyer or a doctor? Because you're going to basically be broke for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that pressure was on young people to pursue those kind of conventional careers, and because there weren't a lot of avenues for artists, compared to say now, where suddenly with the advent of digital, you actually have really meaningful careers in digital art and
a way to kind of get distributed immediately. Back then, it was really like there were a lot of gatekeepers. You had to be discovered. And to be from a small town like Portland, Oregon, which at the time, was not wired to the grid in the, on the internet scale. I mean, it was really like a small town between San Francisco and, Seattle.
Right.
And many people really didn't know where it was, or they thought it was, just basically surrounded by massive trees, and that was it, logging. Yeah, and it is.
But there's now more buildings sticking out, so you can see it.
So, it was very much like entertain yourself. It was really like find ways to entertain yourself, create, things for yourself, and sit around and draw and come up with ideas for comics, and just that was the environment. And then, but I think we were pretty ambitious in a weird way.
Yeah, I think we were kind of sort of transitioning from. We were living with our mom as kids, and then really there was a point where we went and stayed with our father for here in Portland, and that's when we started to kind of, I think we even came together more at that point, because I think we felt more, I don't know, everything was new, and this relationship was with our father at the time, and we were just, I think we kind of were sticking together like even more of a team, if you will. And in that process, kind of, drawing together on the same comic page, and we were sort of, and making films together. You had your Super 8 camera, and I think you had a 16 millimeter, and kind of trying to come up with projects to do. And it was kind of our way of, I think partly it was our way of kind of, maybe it was a bit of coping and kind of just everything being different, becoming teenagers. All of it was brand new. And so it was just a very vibrant, intense time. And Portland was also it was like 1980, early 80s, a very different kind of city than I think what people think of Portland now, a much darker kind of working class town, but there was like a little bit of a punk rock scene and new wave. And so kind of landed into
little hole in the wall clubs.
Underage clubs and little places you could go. And we were sort of, being exposed to that, and that was kind of our generation. we were still pretty young, even kind of young for the punks. And finding our kind of scene, some of our friends and stuff, and going to school at this alternative high school called MLC, Metropolitan Learning Center. And it was in those environments that I think we started to kind of find some kind of rhythm creatively, where we were actually doing projects together. And there was still that big brother, little brother thing. And when we started drawing this comic book for our school newspaper, we had a sort of, this was also, by the way, in the period of nuclear anxiety, Reagan and all this sense of
the mid 80s was really like starting the peak of the Cold War,
right.
and everybody thought that within 20 minutes the world could be annihilated. So there was a pretty existential fear that was permeating the entire environment, and especially as young people. I mean, I think now young people are very traumatized by the environment and the kind of global warming and what's happening to the world. But back then, I think the trauma was nuclear war. So there was a real kind
and there
of
was
angst about that.
a lot of drum beating and on all sides. So there was it felt more palpable. So those were the stories, those were the themes.
So we came up with this concept called Gamma World. Gamma World. And it was, post-apocalyptic world after the nukes had obliterated the earth, and there were
totally original idea.
Hey, early dystopian comics. So, and that there was like these characters that were looking for the Valley of Peace, a place where animals and plants and humans live together in harmony.
Yes, it exists. It's somewhere.
It's out there, Eden, and we must find it.
And then the characters were
but we have to get through the mutant hordes.
The mutants. We are really into mutants and people being mutated, but not like the X-Men mutants. More like eyeballs on the side of your head,
really
and
messed up.
Like evolved into some creatures. And so those were the dangers around the lurking in the darkness were these mutants. And so the characters were kind of like these, I don't know, generic, good-looking.
Well, it was very. I think it was for me.
Miri,
it was
and what was the guy's
name? Carl and Miri, and then Fritz, the mutant assassin.
And so at this point, we were like, you were kind of coming up with the main overall story, and then and drawing the ships and the characters and stuff. And I was kind of playing catch up. I was still learning to draw, and you could draw really well and could do it all, like the pretty girls and the superhero figures and the perspectives and all this. And I could kind of draw superheroes, and I couldn't draw girls yet. And so, and the
but
female
just
figure,
you wait.
Just you wait. But then I had this character, the mutant assassin. It's like he was my guy,
Mm-hmm.
And
your totem character.
He was I created the mutant assassin, and it's very sort of probably influenced by the Wolverine and this tough guy.
Wolverine and wizards.
Definitely some wizards in there from Ralph Bakshi's wizards. So but we were getting in these little tiffs around like, well, I did this and you did
whose
that.
Name goes
whose
first?
name and this and that, like classic. So Jakob was signing it first, and I was saying, well, I came up with the mutant assassin, and so then we started signing panels, and so we realized, okay, this is kind of silly, and then that was really where I think at that point we were kind of like, let's just do this as a collective,
let's just
the
call it Pander Brothers, which was very egalitarian.
Yes,
and then
so
it was
advanced,
like, okay, cool, man, that's
but
cool.
I mean that, and a lot of that came from just growing up with a single mom and having to she was like, you guys
take turns
and had to sort that stuff out. So I think those, a lot of it came from that, that sort
But I mean, we were probably like, what, I don't know. I mean, I might have been 17, if that.
Well,
by that.
So Gamma World, I was probably 12 or 13. You were like
15 or
16.
something like that. Yeah. So there we were. We didn't even really realize it, but we had created a brand.
Right.
But
we didn't even know the term.
It was like something that was just. So
it was
kind
really
of
out of practicality.
Yeah.
So we would stop.
It was cool.
But that once we did that, what was funny, then we'd sign the name to the comic. This would appear in our school newspaper, and people started referring to us as Pander Bros or Pander Brothers, and so we started. It kind of stuck, and so but of course you were very independent, and I was sort of doing my own thing too, and you were really getting into the films, and doing these. We did this film called Time Gate, and we did this film also very nuclear angst.
Yeah, Walker 2000. Another end of the world film,
but still, yes, this through line. And then I started creating this character. I was trying to draw women, trying to learn the female figure, and at that time, of course, very motivated to do so, and so I created this character called Carla, and it was sort of space agent femme fatale,
and that was also kind of like the era of Star Wars, like the first set of Star Wars films. So of course we were completely immersed in this space opera kind of action adventure,
yes,
spaceships, and
there was also a little bit of that
thrown in with mutants. I mean, it was a weird mishmash.
B movies, because you were working in a movie theater, and so there were all these B movies, and then there was also some kind of like sneaking into like stuff that was a little like not rated, so there was some nudity, there was a little, kind of got exposed to some of that stuff at an early age, and so we were like that found its way into the comics. They were a little sexy. They were kind of
even underground comics. I mean, we were like that stuff was just laying around too when we were really pretty young. So we were just getting
a lot of hippie houses had like the
fabulous
Zap
furry
comics,
Freak Brothers and Wonder Warthog.
So we were seeing crazy stuff.
Art Crom.
Yeah. Part of us too, maybe it was the combination of punk rock, the combination of this sense of nihilism of the times, and kind of a that there was really, that there may not be a future. So let's just kind of be wild. And so we were kind of pushing the envelope, or there was some shock value involved, and we weren't really political yet. We were kind of, we weren't like politically conscious.
No,
yet.
we were almost like rebelling against our
right.
Very liberal, politically conscious parents, and the kind
in
of
a
the
way
hippie
being
scene
kind
that
of
we grew up around,
shocking.
So let's just
ultra violent and being like kind of being a little
punk provocateurs.
But that was high school, and it was rebellious, and it was kind of there wasn't any steadfast rules. We were pushing the envelope, but we were learning as we went, and so. Suddenly we get this little studio downtown, and we were practically moved out, but we had this little studio in downtown Portland, right above a punk club called the 13th Precinct, as I recall, and that was like 83 or something, 84, and so still at that kind of Reagan era, the wall hadn't come down yet. It was still very tense time, and the economics were crazy, and AIDS was kind of kicking in, but I'd been working at a comic book store, and I had just quit because so all that superhero stuff was in my psyche. All of those sort of influences were there, but we were kind of growing out of that, or I was kind of growing into more young adult interests.
Yeah, right? Music, fashion, even thinking about going to the Fashion Institute or FIT,
right, yeah. And you wanted to go to?
I wanted to go to film school,
NYU, or not NYU, but down in LA,
down to like USC or UCLA,
right.
And all that.
So we were dreaming of something big, but we were still just kind of trying to make it happen by doing rock posters and for bands, and doing little graphics, because we started taking some classes in graphic design 101.
Finding our knowledge of drawing and illustration.
Hand lettering, graphic design, all of those kind of, some of those, we did have a bit of a work ethic, and our father, I think, gave us a lot of that, just getting up every day and making art, and doing it as a profession, really thinking of it like, okay, this is what we do, and having to deal with all those, adults at the time, like, oh, here's $20, or here's, it'll be good exposure for you, and us having to kind of go, no, we have to charge you money, and so we learned those skills kind of trial by fire, but it was tough, and we were fighting just to get the gigs and little gigs at that time. So
starting to make money from our art, and it gave a little taste of the potential, but it was still very like.
And there was we were in this series of studios. There were other professional artists around us, and they were like graphic designers. And so we started to get that discipline of, oh wow, they can do it, we can do it too. And I think that helped. helped us to see the potential. And they were doing artists that were doing, images on like bags for Nordstrom's or posters for
they're real traditional
Yes.
kind of commercial graphic artists
and illustrators.
illustrators,
And
yeah.
so that was, there was a professional photographer. So that was an amazing set of kind of
influences.
pseudo
and-
mentors. Yeah. That were just, kind of, they were doing their thing too. So that all was impacting our sense of the possibility, but also giving us a few opportunities and connections. And so we got a few little gigs here and there, and we ended up doing something for like the Union-based sportswear, and we did this character named Mr. Heat, and he was like a comic book kind of character. Unfortunately, that didn't take off. We were hoping that would become a
their
thing.
national ad campaign,
Right.
Mr. Heat.
But
no.
So things like that. And then there was Kinko's. We were starting to do, I think Kinko's had just opened a store in Portland.
Right, so we were doing like local Kinko's ads, drawing kind of all these characters hanging out at Kinko's with
Right. And they all had their kind of
new wave hipsters.
Well, that was, so we were obviously looking at like magazines, fashion magazines, Patrick Nagel, obviously, who we're compared to sometimes, or at least Grendel is, and from that time. And so there were those really iconic 80s sort of influences, MTV and Interview Magazine. And our studio wall was just filled with
Covered in
just crazy
photos and tear sheets out of like W magazine and
right,
all kinds
and
of stuff.
that was where Antonio Lopez came, because he was drawing for W.
Fashion design, fashion illustrator.
Right, fashion illustrator who would also find his influence in the books. So we're still some of these superhero drawings at a comic book store called Future Dreams, where I had worked, that were on consignment, and we'd done some other little kind of small press thing that was on sale there. And that's when Matt Wagner, the writer of Grendel, came in to do a signing. There had been a black and white Grendel comic book that had come and done it like 3 or 4 issues, and then now he had this, Kamiko Comics was publishing his color indie comic Mage, and Grendel was a backup feature in that. So anyway, that being kind of the basis of it, and he at the time was looking for someone to draw the next iteration of Grendel, which would be the granddaughter of Hunter Rose, the original Grendel, the granddaughter Christine Spar. So and that led to an opportunity to try out for this book, and
that was
Matt's
a big,
awesome.
and that was one of, it was like, I think by the time we got that call, it was like the winter time, and we were like, scraping by, doing little graphic design jobs, and kind of dreaming of like, it'd be cool to be a professional comic artist or a film director or whatever. And then all of a sudden the phone rings, and I don't know if it was Matt or who you talked to him.
Well, I think I'd gone into the comic store to see if we'd sold any drawings, and then they said, hey, here's, give him a call. And then I called Matt, and we had a brief conversation, and the request was to do like
5 pages,
three,
I think.
yeah,
Maybe
5 pages, 3 to 5 pages. I can't remember.
A couple of action pages, and then a conversation scene to just see if we could handle both.
And really, he didn't give us a script. He just said, kind of come up with something. Let us see what you come up with. And so we already kind of had machinations of being writers. So we looked at the character.
Well, he must have
Grendel
described the Christine Spar character, because we drew her.
Yeah, so I basically based on kind of loose
The brief.
descriptions, but there wasn't any visual brief. It was just kind of, she's kind of,
She's got a
cool,
white
she's
streak
white
in her
shock,
hair.
black hair, and she's kind of, modern. And so I created this, by that point, I was pretty proficient at drawing the female figure, and fashion was really influencing me. And obviously Patrick Nagel and these other sort of, influences of pop culture and fashion particularly. So that became the basis of drawing this character, Christine Spar, and really inventing her look. And really that was sort of happening while doing the sample pages. So it all kind of happened all at once, and sent these, fairly elaborate image, for an indie comic. I mean, we were hungry.
Yeah,
So
they had, architecture, backgrounds, fire escapes, rain, zipatone.
Yeah.
The whole.
Well, we were. So yes, there were some pencil versions, and then there was a couple that we inked.
Right.
And at that time, we were still inking with these rapidograph pens, and
We weren't using brush or anything. It was a very
right. And so
technical
it was
pens doing
still
figure art.
kind of hard and stiff, and graphic design. It didn't have a lot of fluidity to the inks, and so it had a look, and it was very bold, but it wasn't really, fluid yet. And I think so we got the penciling, as it turns out.
Yeah,
we got the penciling.
They went for
job.
the pencil.
Well, now you got a taste of what it was like coming up in Portland in the early 80s. Next episode, do we have what it takes to tackle our first major indie comic book series? Find out how it set an 18 and a 21-year-old on a path of collaborative challenges and creative adventures in storytelling.
Grendel Devil's Legacy is written by Matt Wagner and published by Dark Horse Comics. To get notified about new episodes, follow the Pander Bros podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to watch it on our Pander Bros YouTube channel.